Greetings, aviators. I'm Russ Still, and welcome to this mock private pilot oral exam. Now, this is going to be special. I'm not going to breeze through a bunch of questions you might get on your own check ride. We've got something much better. We've brought in a real private pilot applicant and an actual examiner, and they'll be sitting across this table hashing it out. Now, for all intents and purposes, this will be an authentic representation of what your own upcoming check ride might look like. So, to get this thing started, allow me to introduce our applicant, David Yang. He's flying out of PDK and flies a Piper Warrior. And sitting over here in the examiner's seat, as always, is our longtime friend, Todd Shellnut. Todd, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Russ. I can't wait to get started.
Let's assume all the paperwork's done. You've got his checks, so you guys are ready to get started.
Cool.
Take it away.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, David, we're going to have a great time tonight, and I'm going to be using this piece of paper over here. It's referred to as a plan of action. It's got basically everything I'm going to ask you. It's kind of written down on there, and some other things as well, some trigger questions as well.
Okay.
And the way this is going to work is it's all scenario based. So I'll ask you some scenarios based questions. I will ask you some direct questions as well if I need to fill in any gaps as whatnot. If during the time you see me over here writing down some things, please don't worry about that. That's just my way of remembering, because we're going to be together for about an hour to hour and 30 minutes, like Russ stated. Mm-hmm. And so I want to be able to make sure I give you an adequate debriefing. So don't worry about what I'm writing. It could be good, and maybe sometimes it may not good, but either way, it'll still be productive for the both of us in the end. You ready to get started?
I am.
Okay, cool. Well, I have a special treat for you tonight to start off our scenario. The FAA has decided to join us for tonight in our check ride, okay?
Okay.
So they're in here, they're sitting at the table with us, and I want you to prove to me that you're qualified to be sitting in this check ride. How would you do that?
Right, so, well, the first thing I have to do is present my experience as a student for my current flying, right? So that would include my logbook. I also have to present my ID, my medical certificate that I'm able to fly as well. And I think I'm missing one thing that I can't exactly remember.
Okay. Do you have your logbook? I know you don't have it on the table, but do you have it in the check ride with you?
Yes.
Okay. Is there something in there you may have to show me?
I have to show you all the endorsements
okay.
I have, and as well as the hours that I've completed. So that means I logged 10 hours of solo time as PIC, maybe 3 hours in instrument training, 3 hours in nighttime. And I think I'm missing one thing within the 3 hours as well. But
okay. There's a lot of things that you have to prove, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very well. So assuming that today went well and you get your private pilot certificate in this mock check ride today, how long would it be before you would actually have to show someone any recency of flight experience to, like, say, an FAA official, including any items that you think are important in that?
Yeah, so that'll be the biannual flight review that I have to perform. So that's every 24 calendar months. So it goes into the end of the month. I have until the end of the month, 2 years from now, to be able to complete that recency.
Okay. Are there any other recency of experience requirements for a private pilot?
You have to make sure your medical certificate's up to date.
What about as far as flight time goes?
Flight time, I know there is, but I'm freezing it up at the moment.
Okay, no worries. We'll circle the wagon back around to that in just a second. What does it mean to you to be current as a pilot versus proficient as a pilot?
Yeah, so current means that you are legally allowed to fly based on the current regulations. But proficient means that how used to are you to flying, how comfortable are you with it to perform the flight itself.
Okay. So what does it mean for you how are you planning on staying proficient as a pilot?
For me to stay proficient as a pilot means that I try to fly as consistently as possible, so maybe a couple times a week or at least once a week, and practice certain maneuvers and scenarios that I can to make sure that I can handle those situations.
Okay. So if you got your check ride on a particular day and you went 1 year and 11 months and 30 days without flying, would it be legal for you to go up and still fly that same day on the 30th day?
Legally, yes,
Okay.
but I wouldn't be proficient in it because I haven't flown in a while.
Okay, very well. What about hauling passengers? Is there something requirement for that?
Yes, so it depends on day or night, but they're kind of similar. So for daytime, you have to be recent within the past 90 days, and you have to perform 3 takeoff and landings. For nighttime, it's the same as well, but you have to do it to a full stop.
Okay, very good. So after your check ride, you're so excited. You have one of your loved ones that says, hey, I sure would like to go for a flight. And you want to take them for a local area flight, your first passenger as a private pilot out in the real world. Would you be required to log that flight in your logbook?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Well, very good. All right, now let's go out and continue the scenario here. It's been about a year since the last time that you flew at night.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have a sudden urge to do a local night flight by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any legal issues with this, and is there anything that you need to be concerned about?
Yes, because it's been more than 90 days. I'm not recent in night flying, so I have to, at least for carrying passengers, I have to make sure that I need to stay current. So I have to practice at least 3 takeoffs and landings at night.
Okay. So this would be just you soloing.
Okay. For me soloing, yes, I should be okay with it.
Okay, very good. Well, that sounds like you're very good about the pilot qualifications. Let's go on to some airworthiness requirements, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So during your pre-flight today, on your flight portion, or during any pre-flight, it doesn't really matter, whatever time you want to say, there's an FAA Aviation Safety Inspector, ASI, comes up and introduces themselves to you and says that they want to conduct a ramp inspection. You ever heard of that?
I think I've heard it once.
Okay. After checking your pilot certificate, your medical, the safety inspector asked how you determined this airplane was airworthy.
I had to check to see if in the maintenance book to see what was fixed, when was fixed, determine if it's safe to fly. I also have to check to see if it complies with the recent airworthiness directives, or it's either a one-time issued or periodic to make sure they're all in the compliance to be sure it's safe to fly.
Okay. What are you looking for in the logbook particularly?
If it's maintained, so what was maintained, who signed off, if it's maintained, what was fixed, who returned to service. So I think there's one more thing that I have to look for in there. In terms
Is there
of the
like
details.
particular names for any of these inspections or particular things that have to be inspected?
Just whatever it was supposed to be fixed or maintained based on what was broken or whichever it was need to be halved from airworthiness directives, but definitely signatures from the maintenance folks as well as the owner or operator signing off saying it's good to return to service, good to fly.
Let me dig a little bit more on that. How often is the airframe supposed to be inspected?
The airframe, I believe it's the annual check, right? So that's every 12 months.
Okay. Is there anything else with that annual that they're looking at besides just the airframe?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, very well. If you were to make a very hard landing or you crash off airport, does this airplane have any equipment that's required to be on board?
Yeah, so I think for airplane it has like the ELT, so that transmits an emergency signal to, I believe, nearby towers, and we're in the frequency of 1 to 1.5, which lets people know that where you are and where you may have crashed.
Okay. Is your ELT, is it a 121.5? Do you know if yours transmits on that?
I think all of them transmit 1 to 1.5.
Okay. How often does that have to be inspected?
It has to be inspected every year.
Okay. Anything else that has to be inspected? We said that the airframe has to be inspected. We said the ELT. Is there other inspections?
Yes, there's also the transponder that needs to be inspected as well, and that needs to be inspected every 24 months.
Okay. What if the airplane's for hire?
If the airplane is for hire, then it needs to comply with the 100-hour check as well. So that means, in addition to the annual inspection, then every 100 hour the plane's flown, that it has to be inspected as well.
Okay, very good. When you're navigating along, do you navigate GPS direct or do you use Airways?
I use GPS direct.
Okay. Do you ever use Airways?
I have not used Airways yet.
Okay. Tell me about the required documents that must be on board the plane.
Right. So that would have to be the aircraft's airworthiness certificate, the registration, the operating handbook, as well as the. Give me 1 second to think about it. As well as the weight and balance calculations.
Well, when you say weight and balance calculations, does that mean like me and you on board the airplane before we go flying? Or what is the weight? What is weight and balance? What does that mean?
It just means the documentation that shows you which equipment within the aircraft weighs how much and what was it currently weighed without fuel. So this is dry weight.
Okay. Is that the weight that's listed on there? Is it called dry weight, or does it have another weight that's listed on there? Another name for that weight?
I can't exactly recall the exact word for terminology.
Okay, very good. Tell me where these documents, as far as the airworthiness, what makes that document valid?
The airworthiness document, what makes it valid?
Yeah. Does it have an expiration date?
The airworthiness document does not have expiration date on there.
So what makes it be legit or valid or?
That I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that it has to be properly in order for it to be currently valid or to be able to be current. Then it has to be properly. The aircraft needs to be properly maintained, and it has to comply with the airworthiness directives.
Okay. What about the registration? Does it have an expiration date?
Yes, the registration expires every 7 years.
Very good. There was another. Did you list one or two R's
for
that acronym that you use? I think you were trying to tell me ARROW. Is that correct for the acronym?
It's just one
okay.
R.
Is there any other time there's another R in there?
R.
Can I fly this airplane to the Bahamas?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, we'll come back to it. All right, let's look at the next one. You've been talking a pretty good bit about ADs. You've mentioned that a couple of times. Tell me, what is an AD?
Right, so it's a kind of a compliance that all the aircrafts must well, it's a kind of what the FAA wants the aircrafts and owners to comply to for the aircrafts in order to remain airworthy and to fly. So it could be something that they want you to add for safety reasons or something to fix to look out for.
Okay. Are you familiar with, does your airplane have any ADs?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Well, how could you, as a pilot, before you go fly an airplane, how can you know what ADs exist for that airplane and if they've been complied with? How would you know that as a pilot in command?
You can look up in the FAA's website to see if which ones are issued for your aircraft, and then you have to check in the logbooks to see if it's been complied with.
Okay, very good. So when on the FAA's website, you just put in like the N number, or what do you look for?
That I'm not exactly sure. I haven't looked through the entirety of the website yet. Okay,
no worries. So that is a skill you'll need to learn as a pilot, as to how to look up that data and make sure that that's been done.
Okay.
Are there any, are you familiar with something called a Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin?
That I've heard of before.
You know what it is?
Not exactly.
Okay. So the FAA inspector, after he talks to you, he says, okay, I'm satisfied. He shakes your hand. He moves on to the next airplane. You continue to do your pre-flight. You turn the master switch on. You turn all the external lights on to do your walk around the outside. And in your walk around, you see that your anti-collision light system on the airplane is inoperative. There's no breakers pulled or anything like that. It's just the system's not working. Now what?
Now I think what I have to do is check to see if my aircraft complies with the minimum equipment list, to see if it's still under the regulations, if I'm still able to fly the plane.
Okay. Does your airplane have a minimum equipment list?
I haven't gotten read to the part where it displays the minimum equipment list for me yet, but I'm sure it does. It might in the operating handbook.
Okay. So are you familiar with a regulation number 91213?
I remember studying for it in for the knowledge tests.
Okay. So what I'd like to know is, you're out there at the airplane, you've identified a system that's not operable. What do you have to do as the pilot in command?
I think I will have to look up either on, I think the FAA website will display the minimum equipments that that our airplane needs to have in order to fly, or check my minimum equipment list in order to make sure that it's eligible to fly.
Okay. What if it was just a light bulb that was out? Are you authorized to replace the light bulb as a pilot, as the pilot of that airplane?
It's a light bulb that's out. I don't believe so, because that requires more equipment to bring the light bulb, take the light bulb out. But I believe the pilot is me as a pilot, I am able to perform basic maintenance work.
Okay. Let's go back to the light bulbs being out, and let's kind of touch on that a little bit more, because I need to dig on that a little bit more.
Okay.
Can you legally fly that airplane with the anti-collision lights being inoperative?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Is there any way that you could get that airplane legal to still fly it to your destination?
I have to check. I think I have to check with the FAA to see what is the, I guess, the minimum list that's able for me to fly. That's with the equipments that are operable.
Okay.
Or let them know, and then they'll give you permission to do so.
Okay. Does the FAA have any type of tool where they give you special permission to fly an airplane that's not airworthy?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. What would be a concern of yours of flying this aircraft without the anti-collision light system?
My concern is that it would probably be more or less a safety concern. People may or may not see that my engine's probably running, or in the air. It's harder for the aircraft to see, especially at night, if I'm an aircraft that's flying towards them or away. So I could be a hazard.
Okay. So if you had to fly the airplane without the anti-collision light system operable, what precautions would you probably take in a situation like that?
Personally, I probably wouldn't fly at all.
So the question was, if you had to,
right,
what precautions would you take?
I'd probably make sure I turn on all of the external light sources that I have,
Okay.
so I can illuminate myself, make sure everyone can see me.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the weather information, and let's talk about what we would have for weather. Now, we are going to show some things here on the screen momentarily, but for right now, we're just going to talk about some certain things to get us started.
Okay.
As a pilot, what services do you use to get the weather?
For me, I use 1-800 WX Brief, which is, I believe, a flight service station, and they provide information about the weather and gives you weather briefs and forecasts as well.
Do you do the live briefer or do you do the online briefing?
I'm not exactly sure which is different, but I think I do the online briefing.
So you go to a computer?
Yes.
You don't call on a phone?
No.
Okay, so that's what I would mean when I say a live briefer, is actually calling on the phone.
Okay.
On the phone. If you were getting ready to depart within the hour, gives you an option of 3 different briefings that you can get on aviationweather.gov. Which briefing would you choose and why?
If I'm leaving right now, I'll probably choose a standard briefing.
Okay.
It'll give me the current weather as well as weather along my route.
Okay. And the standard briefing is good for about how long up to a departure point? Departure time.
That I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's within 12 hours.
Okay. Let's see here. So on the aviationweather.gov, I happen to have on my laptop here, which we'll put on the screen, we have aviationweather.gov pulled up. And we'll just kind of start on the low side. We'll look at some very basic reports. I'll ask you some questions about some basic reports.
Okay.
So there's some textual reports, and then there's some graphic reports. So we're going to look at some textual reports first. I'll start off by looking at the METAR. And of course here, what you can see on the screen is at first, this has a graphical depiction of where we're going to go. Mm-hmm. If you were looking at just the graphic depiction, I can see here where my mouse is, that there's the Atlanta, around the PDK area, and Savannah's right over here. What are these items called here on the screen that appear around these airports? What is this, all these numbers and stuff called?
The technical term for I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Can you read this?
I haven't exactly read this one before, but I can see the legend down there.
Okay. I'm going to zoom in here. All right. So this is referred to as a station model, and it basically shows the weather for that particular area. So let's do something a little bit different. Let's go down, instead of looking at a station model, let's actually go down and pull up the METAR, and let's see what we get. So of course I want to go to, we're originating at a KPDK, but what I can tell you about PDK, it doesn't have a METAR right now. If I put it in, it's not going to show it. So I'm just going to pick another airport that's very close. You don't have to worry about knowing anything about this airport. It's just for conversational purposes with me and you, okay?
Okay.
And we're going to look at this data here. And I'm going to ask you, we'll start with the very top one up here. What is this top report? What is the name of it?
The name of, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, what's the one below it called?
The one below is the forecast, but the top one I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Name-wise.
This is called a METAR. You ever heard of that?
Yes, I've heard of METAR.
So this is called a METAR, so it's for RYY's identifier. Why don't you start right here at the 07 and read all the way until you get to A02 for me, please.
Okay. So at the airport, RYY, on the 7th day of September, at 2150 times Zulu, there is wind from direction 310 at 9 knots, gusting up to 14 knots. The area has visibility of 10 statute miles, clear skies. The next one I'm not exactly sure, and as well as the next one as well. And then after that's remarks. I'm not exactly sure about the A02 as well.
Okay. So you kind of think about this. Have you ever been at an airport where they read the weather like over at ATIS or something?
Yes.
Can you kind of play that in your mind and think about how the ground control or the AWOS or ASOS would read that off? And then think about that again. Just kind of read those numbers as if the ASOS or AWOS or ground control or ATIS is reading it to you. And then let's take a stab on that 3118 and the A2986 again. So just kind of in your mind, just kind of read it as it would off the weather.
Okay. I think the 3118 means the temperature and the dew point.
I would agree with you.
A2986, still got to think about that one just a little bit more.
What if we put it?
That's the altimeter setting.
There you go. There you go.
So that'll be altimeter setting. You have to set the altimeter to 2986.
Outstanding. Good job. So let's start right here with the first, with the METAR, and let's talk about, would you go flying if you read that METAR?
I think based on the conditions itself, I think I would go flying.
Okay, very good. So we'll get to what we're going to refer to as personal minimums in a minute, but first I'm going to ask you to read the next one. So what's the name of this next one?
The from grouping forecast.
Look over here to the right. This is the abbreviation for it over here.
Oh, the terminal area forecast.
Terminal area forecast. Why don't you start right here after RYY and read me let's just read all the lines.
Okay, sounds good. So from RYY on the 7th day of September at time 1741 Zulu, between times of day 7th of September at 1800 Zulu time and the 8th day of September at 1800 Zulu time, so about a day's span, expect wind from 270 at 10 knots with more than 6 miles of visibility, statute miles of visibility with scattered clouds at layer 4,000.
Okay, let's read the next line too.
So in the same day, the 7th day of September, on the 2300 Zulu time, the wind will change to 290 at 7 knots with 6 statute miles with a few clouds at 6,000 feet.
Okay. So what time right now do you have on your watch? What time is it locally right now? Do you have a watch on?
Yes.
What time is your watch say?
It's at 6:14, roughly.
6:14. Okay. All these times are they in Eastern time or Central time or what time?
I don't know exactly I forgot the exact technical where it is located, but I know it's located in Greenwich, which is about 4 hours of time difference at the moment.
So right now, where you're sitting in this office in Georgia, it's local time plus or minus a number. Which one is it? Is it plus a number, or do I subtract that number? I think you said 4.
Right. So if we're looking at this time right here, we'll have to subtract the 4 hours to get the time right now where we are at.
Okay. All right. Let's look at the next thing. These items here that you see on the screen, is this real or is this just a hypothetical guess?
This is a hypothetical guess.
Okay. So it's just what we refer to as a forecast, right? Any issues with that?
It may not be accurate in the future, so it might change around.
Okay. What do you see as a pilot when you have to mitigate the risk associated with weather being so dynamic as it is? What kind of situations do you see that plays when you're looking at just a forecast?
You can forget to check or update yourself with what the current weather is closer to the departure time. So if the weather changes to different than forecast, then you might have to change flight plans or make different decisions.
Has that happened to you so far during your training?
Yeah, a couple of times where I scheduled flight in advance thinking it'll be good, but then the weather turned bad, so I had to cancel the flights.
Absolutely. All right. Can you tell me for that METAR at the top, can you tell me how often that weather report comes out?
Every 24 hours.
And how long is it good for?
At the very top.
So that would be the METAR. So we always want to know what time they come out and how long they're good for when they come out.
Forgot the exact time that they are good for, but
okay. So we do have another one below it. You identified that as the TAF earlier, or terminal area forecast. How often do they come out, and how long are they good for when they come out?
I believe they're good for whichever the time they are displayed on the tab itself.
How long is this one good for?
This one is good for 24 hours
Okay.
from the 1800 Zulu
Yeah.
of today to 1800
So
tomorrow.
what time did this one come out? What time was it released?
Released in 1741 Zulu
That's an
time.
odd number, isn't it?
Yes.
1741. Good. So do you know how often they come out? Like how many hours before the next one comes out?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. No worries. So now, looks like pretty good weather here, but I don't like the fact that it's pretty good weather. So I want to see some not good weather. Let's see if I can find some not good weather and have you look at this. Let's start off by looking at just this top one here, and we'll read this one all the way to the AO2 as we did the first one.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so at Airport KMCN, 7th day of September, time 21:53 Zulu, wind coming from 60 at 17 knots, gusting to 27 knots. Visibility is 10 statute miles. Thunderstorm with scattered clouds at 5,000, broken clouds at 6,000, and more broken clouds at 7,500. The temperature and dew point is 27 and 19 degrees, with the altimeter at 2984 and remarks. Not exactly sure about the AO2.
Okay. Have you ever practiced reading anything after the remarks section?
Not
like AO2 and after?
Not much.
Okay. Very good. Let's read the first two lines of the TAF.
Mm-hmm. So first two lines, same airport, KMCN, 7th day of September at 2203 Zulu, from the hour 22 to the next day at 1800 Zulu. Winds will be coming from 250 at 7 knots with more than 6 miles of statute miles of visibility. It looks like VCSH, I'm not exactly sure, but it has scattered clouds at 4,000. Temporary, the weather will change to variable winds at 25 knots, gusting to 35 knots. As the visibility will be 4 statute miles, with thunderstorms and rain around, and there will be broken clouds at 4,000. Not exactly sure about the CV, and this temporary is good for from 2,200 to 2,400 hours.
Okay. So a minute ago, we talked about this Greenwich Mean Time that you mentioned, and we said it was +4.
Right.
So what time is it right now in Zulu time, or in Greenwich Mean Time, excuse me? You have to look at your watch, add 4 to that.
Right. So there'll be 10:20.
So give it to me in 24-hour scale.
So that'll be 2020.
Okay. So using the TAF, which line, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, would dictate the current weather for our departure time of now?
The current departure time of now, it'll be the first line and the second line.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question because we looked at a TAF a minute ago. And on that TAF, I asked you how long that TAF was valid for. You looked at the timestamp and you said 24 hours. How long is this one valid for?
Looks like it's valid. It's only valid for. It looks like it's only valid for. I don't know why I'm struggling to do math at the moment.
That's okay. Is it 24 hours?
It's not 24 hours.
Okay. Less or more?
It's less.
Okay.
I think it's valid for 18 hours.
Okay.
No, it's valid for 20 hours.
Very good. I'm not going to hold you to the math on this. So we're looking at, whenever we leave an airport, we always look at the weather in a very specific realm. We look at our current conditions of our departure point, en route, and then our forecast about where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, we said that these reports were all a forecast, right?
The bottom, the tab is forecast, but the METAR is current.
Okay. Is it current like for right now?
It's displayed now, but it's good for until the next METAR comes out.
So when did it come out? When did that METAR come out?
At 21:53 Zulu, so I believe that's...
So you think that those are actually the still current, what's going on at the airport?
No, because the TAF has updated weather.
So probably, when would probably, if we've been, with everything being static, when would that METAR really only be accurate? At what time?
At the time it was taken.
Yeah. So what time was it taken?
21:53.
Okay. So that's probably the only time. Is there any weather report that is actually accurate that's taken in real time?
I don't exactly remember the name for it, but I think there is.
What do you, who would give it? Do you know who gives it, this weather report? Is it a weather briefer who gives it, or is it a pilot who gives it? This one weather report, that's the only weather report that's real-time observation.
I know there's PIREPs, which pilots, they do provide some weather reports.
Okay, good.
So I think that would be one of them.
Very good. So you're flying along,
Mm-hmm.
and you see that the visibility is dropping down below what was actually forecasted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm air traffic control. You're on flight following. Give me a PIREP.
I've never given one before. So
How do you think you would do it?
I think I would do it very similar to the formatting that it has to the METAR, and let them know the critical information. So things will be like wind, visibility, at which altitude, what plane I'm flying in, if there's any other observations that I made.
Okay. So let's transition a little bit to, we're in flight now. So we're still going to talk about weather, but we're going to talk about the en route phase of things.
Okay.
While you're en route to your destination, you see some unfavorable clouds ahead of you,
Mm-hmm.
which causes some concern on your side. How could you get an updated weather forecast while actually flying?
I believe I can tune into the weather, either AWOS or actual ATIS information from nearby airports. At least that is not more than 100 miles away.
Okay. Well, let's say that the weather you're looking at looks to be about 50 or 60 miles ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
How would you do that?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Well, let's go off the thing you said.
Mm-hmm.
What did you tell me that you may do, was a choice, was an option for you?
The AWOS and the ATIS from the other nearby airports.
Okay. How would you determine in flying what airports are beneath that weather that's 60 miles ahead of you?
I would use, if I have a paper map, I will kind of map out, measure out the distance, and then kind of draw a radius to see, what are the airports near that area, to kind of give an idea of which weather frequency that I can listen to, or if I'm using ForeFlight, that I can use that, look at that as well.
Do you train out of a controlled or uncontrolled field?
Controlled field.
Okay. You ever landed out of uncontrolled field?
Yes.
Okay. What's the frequency called there that may have the weather you said?
The AWOS or ASOS?
AWOS or ASOS. Have you ever seen an airport that has the same ASOS frequency as another airport?
I think I might have checking out the different airports on the map and not exactly flown to them before.
Okay. So what do you think? What do you think a mitigation thing would be for you as far as trying to get a frequency which may double up from someplace else that's 60 miles away while you're at altitude?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, remember the radios are line of sight, right? The higher you are, the better the reception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You may pick up more than one AWAS frequency if you're up at altitude.
Gotcha.
Okay. I see you have an iPad. Do you plan on flying with an iPad?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you have ADSB or any form of GPS weather data on your iPad?
I do, yes.
Okay. What are you using? Is it ADSB or
it's ADSB.
Okay.
It picks up ADSB. Yeah.
So you get weather. That's a viable tool, right, in flight?
Yes.
So let's go over this again.
Okay.
I think maybe you're thinking that you can't use certain tools. So this is a real life thing. Now, I want you to think real life. You're in the airplane. You're the only person in the airplane. Let's really get down to the nitty gritty. There's no one else in there to help you. No flight instructors, no passengers, nothing. Just you and your iPad and your Garmin GNS 430 and your 6-pack and your mag compass and a frequency for air traffic control. How can I determine what the weather is going to be out there? Using all your resources.
I can look at the iPad to measure how far away the weather is.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. I can look at the other pilots reporting nearby to see if they are also reporting the weather, if it's favorable for flying. I'm not exactly sure where to go from here.
Well, do you use flight following?
Oh yes, I do use flight following.
Who are you talking to when you use flight following?
In Georgia, usually Atlanta Center or Atlanta Approach.
Can Atlanta Approach help you with this?
I've never done it before, but I know they can help provide a traffic advisory.
Okay, so you're flying along. Now you have a genuine concern, right? You feel, that's a bunch of black stuff. Oh my goodness, I just saw a lightning bolt go down through there. We'll talk about that in a minute too.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you tell ATC if you saw that?
I can report it to them and ask them if it's favorable, the weather is favorable there.
Absolutely, you can do that. That's what they're there for. They can help you with that stuff.
Okay.
Now there is some type of issues with regards with what type of radar they have, but in this particular instance, for what we're doing right now, we're simply just talking about the possibility that they had weather radar and not just radar to see the airplane. Okay.
I see.
Yep. I don't want any of the viewers to start hacking me to death in the comments. Okay, so you have several different ways you can get updated weather in the airplane.
Correct.
Okay. And you can also give a PIREP.
Yes, correct.
Correct. Good deal. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Get away from this. I'll make you stop sweating so hard. Yeah, we're going to look at, on the big screen here, your cross-country flight plan.
Okay.
And your cross-country flight plan that you did from Peachtree to Cab, Georgia to Savannah, Georgia was done via ForeFlight, or was it done paper-wise?
It was done via ForeFlight.
Okay. So while we're waiting to get that up on the big screen, let's look at some other things. Let's look at your route on the big screen here. So when we get your route looked at here, we'll bring up your flight plan here in just a minute. I see there's a bunch of coordinates over there, so I know you've done something. And you've got just a ton of things coming out of PDK. Can you tell me, what are these points that you've chosen along your route?
Yeah, so these are waypoints I kind of set for myself. They're roughly about 20 nautical miles apart, just for me to dead reckon on my flight. So I can check certain landmarks along those routes to make sure that I'm flying on the right path to Savannah. Okay.
If you are currently, what altitude did you choose before I ask this question? I'm sorry.
5,500.
5,500. I can see it right up there, 5,500 feet in the right-hand corner of our screen for our viewers. Not really that tight in close, but you can see it up there. Mm-hmm. So when you took the weather, do you remember what the visibility was along your route when you took the weather today?
I don't exactly recall at the moment.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, we have that fancy system that we were looking at earlier, the METAR. Mm-hmm. Do you remember how many miles of visibility that it said on the METAR?
I can look it up right now, but I don't remember.
Yeah, go ahead and look it up. Absolutely. And that way we won't have things. So we'll keep this up here, kind of show your waypoints. And we're going to try to tie in some of this data, like why we're doing something here. And we're going to try to correlate this data to get to a final opinion about things.
Okay. Yeah, so it looks like along most of the route, it'll be 10 statute miles.
Okay. So this is one of the direct questions I'll ask you. You said your points were about 20 miles apart.
Yes.
So with the current visibility, you're only going to be able to see about how far?
Half the distance of 10 miles.
Half the distance of that. So that's something that we probably want to keep in mind as a pilot, especially if we get lower in visibility. We're only able to see that far ahead of us, and you're at a mile above the ground, so you're looking at that particular distance.
Correct.
So let's start off by I'm just going to basically, from what I see up here, just start asking questions for what I see. This is going to overlap a couple of the future segments that we're going to have in my plan of action, so I'll have to make some check marks ahead.
Okay.
But first off, we'll just go ahead and ask some things that we can definitely see on this that I would like to know. A bunch of airports on here that have these magenta vignette rings around it. What are those?
Those are Class E airspace, but it goes down to 700 feet AGL.
Okay. So outside of that vignette, and just in the open spaces where there's no other airspace denoted, what is the altitude floor of the Echo in that area?
It'll be 1200 AGL.
Okay, very good. Now, I see that there's some airports up in here that are circle, with the circle vignette, and this is actually a little this chump question. So if you don't know this one, we can move on to the next one, but I just want to see what your scope is. And there's some, like we see here, that have a little square box attached to it. Mm-hmm. There's another one over here, a little square box. What's the purpose of that?
For Class E airspace, I'm not exactly sure, but I know for Class C, it's most likely for instrument approaches or procedures.
You'd probably be exactly right in this case, too. Absolutely. I see that some airports are colored magenta. I see some airports are colored blue. Mm-hmm. Why?
The magenta ones are uncontrolled airports, but the blue ones have control towers in their controlled airspace.
Okay, very well. I see that there is these big black rings around Macon here, and you're more than welcome to pull it up on your ForeFlight if you need a closer look at it there. Can you tell me what these big black rings are around the Macon area?
So I think they're called TRSA. They're the Terminal Radar Service area, I believe. Okay. And they pretty much provide radar coverage around that surrounding area. So in that area, they know where you exactly are. You don't really need to transmit your location. Okay,
so that would have been my next question is participation mandatory? I tell you what, let's do this. Let's transition over to the next slide that shows the close-up view of PDK.
Okay.
And then we'll have some blown-up views of exactly where we want to do. What we're going to do is just kind of look at some airspaces around that area, and we'll see what we're looking at there. Actually, this is a great thing here. This is actually gave way to a great question here that I'm going to ask. So this was taken from ForeFlight. This is a screenshot from ForeFlight, by the way. I'm going to ask you some questions that's basically off of this screenshot, which is a common faux pas on these rides. I see that some of these airports are rectangular shaped. What does that mean when they're rectangular shaped? I know some are round. I see these are rectangle.
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Well, let's do this. If you'll look up there at Peachtree DeKalb here, we have the information for PDK Airport right here.
Right.
Can you read that?
Yeah, Peachtree DeKalb, controlled tower frequencies 20.9. The ATIS for weather is 128.4. The elevation is 998 MSL. I'm not exactly sure about the next frequency. And then the there's right pattern traffic for 3 right and 21 and 2 right
Okay.
runways.
So if you need to, you're more than welcome to zoom this in on your chart as well. What does the star mean after 20.9?
It means it's not operating. The tower is not operating 24 hours a day.
And what about the C after that?
It means that frequency can also be as the common traffic advisory frequency.
Okay. After the fill elevation of 998, there's an asterisk L. What does that mean?
I'm not exactly sure for that.
Okay. And then what about the 60? Or 60, excuse me. We don't run numbers together in aviation.
I don't even exactly remember what the 60 that means on the sectional chart.
If there was something on this chart and you did not know what it meant, what could you use as a reference in the Checkride or either as a pilot while you're flying?
I can use the legend that's on the sectional chart.
Do you have a legend?
I don't have it with me. It's in my bag, but it's. I think I can see it on floor flight too.
I think you can see it on ForeFlight. Why don't you take just a second and see if you can pull up the legend for the VFR sectional on ForeFlight. And while you're doing that, I'm going to walk through one of these stump the chump things. While you're doing that, I'm going to walk through what I'm talking about here. It's very common when you're looking at a ForeFlight for a pilot to want to zoom in on ForeFlight. One of the toggle type options that we have on ForeFlight is we can transition this chart. This actually is not a VFR sectional that we're looking at. This is a chart which basically shows a blown up version of the VFR area around Atlanta. It's referred to as a TAC chart. And the difference between what you're seeing on the airports here versus what you would see on a sectional is that all the airports on a TAC chart are actually rectangular. So the question an examiner may ask in this regard is, what is the length of this airport here at Lawrenceville? And someone actually may say, well, it's greater than 8,069 feet, which is what the legend states. But it's actually not. It's actually just a little over 6,000 feet there, according to the data. But it's a little bit confusing because you see it as a rectangle and you don't know that you zoomed into a TAC. So if you're using ForeFlight, make sure that you have that feature cut off or are very, very aware that zooming in is actually going to create this different of picture than it actually would be if you did not have that feature turned on. All right. Did you find it?
I am not able to find it.
Okay. So another recommendation would be that just make sure you have all your, if you're going to use ForeFlight and no paper, I don't know if you're going to use paper or not, but just make sure you got all your legends downloaded into your, or readily accessible in the ForeFlight. It's very, very important to do that. Okay. Let's look at some figures on here so we can make sure that you know how to read a chart. And of course, the figures I'm going to ask you here, even though this is a TAC chart, would be equivalent to what's on a sectional. I see there's a 22 here over Atlanta Hartsfield. What does that 22 mean right there? There's another one here. There's a 1.5 over there, a 1.5, a 1.627 up there.
So I believe that marks the highest obstacle elevation.
You know what the proper name of it is?
No.
If you don't, no big deal. Okay, good. Maximum elevation figure, or MEF is what that's called.
Okay.
What does this mean? 125 over SFC.
So it's marking that particular section of the airspace, the dimensions of it, the vertical dimensions of it. So it'll be up to 12,500 from the surface level.
Okay. And you say that the airport you normally fly out of is where, Lawrenceville?
It's PDK.
Oh, PDK. Okay.
Yes.
So let's just start with a standard review of the airspace. Tell me everything you know about Class Bravo airspace.
Class Bravo, they are the busiest airspaces in terms of going in and out of the airports. You require clearance to enter the airspace. Typically about 30 miles out, which is the big magenta circle there, you need to have your transponder as well as your ADS B out turned on. You need clearance to enter the airspace as well as to land and depart the airport. And to enter the airspace, you also need clearance as well, no matter what type of airplane you are.
Okay. So you get ready to, you want to go inside the Bravo.
Mm-hmm.
And you call the appropriate approach facility up and you say, hey, this is November so-and-so. I have the information I'd like to fly into the Bravo. And the controller says, Roger, 1234, turn left heading 270, send and maintain 2000, squawk 5153. Can you enter the airspace?
No, you cannot enter the airspace.
Why not?
Because the controller didn't say you're clear to enter the Bravo airspace.
Absolutely. Very good. All right. So the airplane you're flying it's a Piper Archer Warrior?
Warrior 2.
Warrior 2. So you'd have to pull the power back really, really far back and slow the airplane down to what airspeed or less underneath the Bravo?
You have to be under 200 knots.
So stay under 200 in the Piper. Don't go over 200. What if I get into the Bravo? What's the airspeed?
In a Piper Warrior, it doesn't matter what type of plane I'm flying?
Yeah. Yeah, just what is it?
Okay, it'll be 250.
Very good. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next airspace. Let's talk about the next type of airspace. I'm going to bring it up here on, just so you'll have a view of it. I'm going to bring the next airspace up here on the big screen that I have on my laptop here, and we'll talk about Class Charlie airspace. And now, luckily for us, we're going into a Class Charlie airspace, which is Savannah. So here's Savannah down here. This is the next one in sequence. So let's look at the airspace around, or look at this airspace here. We've identified this as a Charlie. Tell me everything you know about Charlie.
So Charlie is kind of in between a Class D and a Class Bravo. It's very similar in a way to Class Bravo because you still need you still need clearance in order to depart or enter the airspace itself. You need to have your transponder as well as ADS-B active to enter. But I think the main difference is that it doesn't provide you with separation service like Class Bravo does, but it provides you with traffic advisories as you enter the airspace.
Okay. What do you need to enter the Charlie?
You need clearance from the tower to enter the airspace. Okay.
And what is the VFR cloud clearances and weather minimums in Class Charlie?
It's 3 miles visibility, 1,000 feet above clouds. You need to be 500 feet below clouds and 2,000 feet away horizontally from clouds.
Now, if I was VFR, VFR only, and I want to depart Savannah, what would be the minimum visibility in clouds that I would need to legally depart the Savannah airspace or Savannah airport?
That detail, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. All right, let's flip it and let's just say that I'm wanting to come into Savannah. Let's say that they canceled my flight following in flight and I've been just basically monitoring the system. They don't have time for me. And I'm getting just about over the Statesboro Bullock County Airport here that you see on the top of the screen. At what point from there should I start calling to get into permission to enter the Class Charlie?
You should start calling them at least more than 20 nautical miles away because they have a procedural area above their marked airspace over there. So at least contact them 20 miles outside of the airport.
Okay. So using the information that you see here on this chart, if I were going to start calling them, what frequency would I dial? Would I dial in?
You will dial them on 118.4, which is their delivery.
Okay, good. And we can see it right there in the center of the screen. It's got that white communications box there, what we would contact them on. So if I was just looking here and I didn't have my plotter to kind of to see like when, where 20 nautical miles is there anything on here that would kind of give us a sign to say, hey, you should probably call them about this point? Recommended place to start calling.
That I'm not exactly sure, but it looks like it might be just above where the box is.
Okay. Well, let's look at this. I see over here at Claxton Evans, which is over here at this part.
Mm-hmm.
I see there is a big magenta flag sticking out of that airport. What does that mean?
That's just the visual marker.
What would you use it for? I see there's another one sticking out of Statesboro.
I would use it to, when I contact Savannah, I let them know that that's a kind of a waypoint I can see to let them know how many miles I am away from that particular airport, and they can get an idea how far away I am.
Okay, give me a quick radio comm. You're calling me on 18.4. Tell me how that would sound. You're the pilot. I'm the controller. Talk to me. Let me hear you.
I don't exactly remember how the procedure goes for the to talk to approach for a class chart airspace.
Here's a little quick tip for no matter what you're doing on the radio: who you are, where you are, and what you want. Just those three things.
Okay.
Who, where, and what. So use that guidance and tell me, how would you make that call over Statesboro?
Okay, it'll be Savannah approach, Warrior 84400, about 72 to southeast of Statesboro County. Would like a full stop at Savannah Airport.
Sounds good. I think the only thing they would probably ask you is, do you have the current ATIS there? That'd be it. You'd get the ATIS before you go in there, and you'd have all the things that you need. Okay, good. Let's look at some other things here on the chart. I see that this airport here for Statesboro also has a little star above it. What's the star mean?
It means it has a beacon at the airport.
Okay. It also has these tick marks out the sides and out the bottom. What does that mean?
It means they have fuel there.
Okay. Okay. Here on Statesboro, if we look right below it there's a 495 written on top of a parentheses 321. What does that mean?
So 4995 is the MSL height of the top height of that obstruction, and then in parentheses, and the 321 tells you how high the obstruction is from that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember a long time ago, my instructor told me, she said, you look at your altimeter in the airplane and you would see 495 when you hit the top of the tower, and then you're going to fall 321 feet to the ground. Kind of dismal way to look at it, but it always helped me to understand it. There was always kind of a funny thing for me to look at that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. There is this other thing here. It's like a little bird's eye, little view thing. You can see it right there next to the 495. I call it a little bird's eye there. You see that?
Yes.
What do you think that is?
I'm not exactly sure. A radio tower?
Kind of close. It has this little box that's associated with it. Let's zoom in just a little bit tighter on that. And this little communications box right here, frequency box, goes with it. Does that help?
Is it kind of similar to a VOR?
It is similar to a VOR. It is a navigational beacon. This is kind of an old school thing nowadays, but this is what we used to call an NDB. Actually, it still is called an NDB.
Okay.
But do you have an NDB or ADF receiver in your airplane?
That I'm ADF. That I'm not sure. I'm not sure yet. I have to look through the.
You'd probably know. You only listen to the AM stations on there that we use to when we're flying around. Listen to the radio while we're flying around. Think of the past almost a little bit. Let's look at some other things here. I see that there is a this particular airport right here that says got a R in the middle of it. What's that?
I think it means it's restricted or a private airport.
Can you land there?
Technically, yes, but I'm not sure.
Okay. What if you had an emergency?
Yes.
Okay. I see down here there's this 16 down here.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That is the highway.
Okay, very good. And I see across there's just some blue lines on here. What are these blue lines here? These little skinny blue lines.
There are streams of water.
Okay. And I see there's a black line that goes across it here. What's that?
I think that's a dam.
Okay. And what do you think this little box is right here?
It says it's a plant, so like a power plant, some sort.
Some type of power plant, some type of something. Yep, absolutely. Let's do a couple more of these identifiers here just to kind of see where we are. There's up here in the top, and I'll put it in the middle of the screen for all the viewers can see. There's a little bit of dot here, and there's a 216 next to that dot. That dot 216 goes with that black dot. What's that?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. It's called a point elevation figure. It tells you exactly what the altitude is right there at that spot.
Okay.
All right. Let's look at this. What is this? This black line here with these dashes going across it up through here.
Those are the railways.
Okay. And what is this one here?
Those are the roads, local roads.
So I would agree with
Oh.
this one. What about this one?
This is the power line.
Okay, a power line. Very good. So there's a lot of things on here that we can start talking about. There's a tremendously large amount of things. Let's move right down here. We're going to ask some things very closer to our destination airport. As we very much scroll down here, we're going to look at this particular look at Savannah here. It's kind of odd because we actually have this let's see here. I apologize, my eyes are going wacky here. I'll tell you what, let's look at this in the interim. What is this box right here for?
So that's it displays the vortex and its frequency for Savannah.
Say that one more time.
It's the vortex for the Savannah airport, and also displays the frequency should you want to use it as a navigational aid.
Okay. So read from the top here what that is and read that box for me.
So this is the Savannah vortex. So the frequency for it is 115.95. CH106, I'm not exactly sure. SAV is the abbreviation, and then the right symbols are the Morse code for it.
Okay. Very good. So we were talking earlier about navigating with VORs. There's a lot of questions in regards to VORs that I could ask you about that, but you were telling me you've only done GPS, so you probably want to put that into your learning bag is to learn how to do the VORs in case you do that as well.
Will do.
So this one, we'll go back to this here. You didn't ever get your legend pulled up, did you?
No, I did not.
Let's look at this Class Charlie one more time, ask a couple more questions, and then we'll be done with this. There's a 41/13. What does that mean?
That tells you the top and bottom of dimensions of this particular Charlie airspace. So
Okay.
that'll be 4,100 and 1,300.
Okay. Now, the last thing we're going to do here, and it's just for time brevity, I want you to imagine that you are right there where the H is in Hilton Head, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right there in that H. And I want you to believe you ever played the rocket ship game?
I have not played rocket ship game.
All right, we're going to play the rocket ship game today for the check ride. You're right there where that H is. You're on the ground, and you're in a rocket. And I want you to blast off, and I want you to go all the way to the top of the airspace and go all the way up and tell me every time you get to a different altitude and transitioning to a different airspace, so just go straight up and tell me all the altitudes and all the airspaces you're going to be flying with all the way up to 60,000 feet.
Okay, so start off at the very ground. From 0 to 1,200 AGL, I'll be in Class G airspace. From 1,200 to 1300, I'll be in Class E. And from 1300 to 4100, I'll be in Class C airspace. And above that, I'll be in Class G airspace until 18,000 feet. And then above that will be good Class A airspace.
Okay. All the way up to what?
All the way up to 60,000 MSL.
What's above that?
I believe that's also Class G airspace.
Okay. That'd be Class E.
Class E.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. No worries. All right. So let's come off of here and let's look at your flight plan real quick. We'll ask some questions about that. And just a couple of questions off that, because I do want to ask you a couple of systems questions before we call it quits today.
Okay.
So this is just a lot of data. Like I'm looking at this, it just looks like I'm looking at the Matrix. And I don't see Keanu Reeves anywhere, so I'm not sure how to read this. What is the purpose of you actually doing this? Why do you as a pilot need to do this?
It's for you to keep track of where you're going and make sure you're on time at the right place throughout those certain checkpoints. Make sure you arrive on time and you're not like you're burning the right amount of fuel, so you're not putting yourself in an unsafe position.
Okay. So I see that here you have definitely, you got your points around here, which is your points that you've made up that you want to look at. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, in ForeFlight, you can rename those. You just press on them on the screen. You can rename them like road to the left or small lake or something like that.
Gotcha.
It goes on your chart here. But I'm looking across here, and you mentioned something to me right there, and you said that one of the things you do this is because of time. So I see over here that you have the leg times 9, 5, 8, 12, and 10, and so on and so on. So if you're using this, as you said, and you get to your top of climb, which is supposed to be 9 minutes, what if it was actually 15 minutes? What would you do as the pilot, as you've done all this work? Clearly, this is not something that was a very quick something to do. You had to think and look and pick these points, right? Mm-hmm. Do the calculations. But what if that leg time was 15 minutes instead of 9 minutes?
To the top of the climb, it was 15 minutes. I might have to redo the calculations to forecast out how long throughout the flight, the rest of the flight is going to be. Maybe redo fuel calculations as well to see if I have enough fuel for the flight.
Mm-hmm. So can you describe to me, like in ForeFlight, what you would do at that time? So, you get to the top of climb, you're like 15, you look down, you say 9, you're like, oh my goodness, that's way off. So what would you do in ForeFlight at that time to basically recalculate or update that to 15s?
To me, what I think I would do is to go through the flight section of the ForeFlight and then perform the recalculation button for the nav log.
Yeah. So who determines that 9 minutes? Is that you that puts that in there, or is that ForeFlight puts that in there automatically?
That I'm not exactly sure. It might be based on the performance data I put into the ForeFlight.
Okay. It may be also based off the data that it grabs from the weather reports and stuff too, as well. So if it's automatically populated, it's almost kind of difficult for it to change it over there. It's something that you have to think about in regards to that, because it only gives you the leg time and the estimated time en route. We don't have any actual times on this as we would on a paper chart. So people who use a digital system, they have to keep this in mind. Otherwise, they may see it here, and then in the system they get up there and the forecast is not correct, and then there is a possibility that you would be up there and may actually run out of gas because you're not accounting for the time in real time.
Okay.
All you have is something printed out. Okay, that's very good. I like this. Let's bring up a closer view. Let's ask a couple of questions from the airport diagrams. Let's go to the airport diagram for Peachtree DeKalb. And we have them both side by sides here for Peachtree DeKalb and Savannah. On these charts, I noticed there's some HS around here. What's that all about?
Those are hotspots, so usually areas with the most amount of traffic.
Okay, very good. Looking specifically over in this chart over here, I'm looking at this chart, I'm looking at this chart. I see there's a couple of differences between each. On the Savannah chart, I see there's a lot of, where this is just has grayed area, there's a lot of gray with hash marks over there, hash lines on it. What is the difference between that and this?
That I'm not exactly sure, but I would guess you need permission to enter those particular areas with the hash marks.
Okay, do you know what that's called with the hash marks?
I do not.
Okay. Let's look at some other things here on this chart as well. We'll look, I tell you what, let's transition back over here to the PDK. As we can see here, there is a small square box here at the very front and a 3 right. It says EMAS. What is that?
That I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, no worries. Let's go back over to the other side. I see there's a bunch of small circles there that says HS. Did I already ask you that? I didn't ask you that, did I?
Yes,
Okay.
The hotspots, right?
Sorry, I'm so far ahead of myself. I just don't know what's going on. If we look over here to the side there is these lines here that says runway 1 and 19, 10, 28. And then it has these stuff underneath it, PCN 70, RC, WT, S75. What's all that?
That I'm not exactly familiar with.
Okay, very well. There is this arrow here, like a arrow up, arrow like that figure right there. What's that figure right there? You can see there's one on the other side of the runway as well.
That I'm not too sure about as well.
Okay, very well. Let's look at this word right here. There's a word right there. What's that word right there?
Land and hold short operations, or lasso.
Would you seeing this on the chart, would you determine that Savannah has lasso operations?
Yes.
If you were coming into the airport to land, how would you know that land and hold short operations are in effect at Savannah?
It'll be on their either charts or within the NOTAMs, I believe.
Okay, very good. Let's transition just a little bit further. I want to try to get just a little bit of piece of everything in. I could definitely dive into a lot of details, but we want to try to keep moving because I want to try to keep moving forward. So let's go just a little bit further into this. Let's talk very quickly about systems, and then we'll get to something else. So we don't need this anymore, so let's talk a little bit about systems. On your airplane, you have multiple systems. There's the engine, there's electrical, there's a fuel system. Tell me a little bit about the fuel system on your airplane.
So the fuel system we have, for the Piper Warrior 2, we had 2 tanks, one on each wing. Holds 25 gallons each, so 50 gallons in total, but only 48 gallons are usable. It has a fuel pump that feeds the fuel into the engine. So the engine has its own. When the engine's running, it can feed its own fuel into the engine, but whenever it's there's always the electrical fuel pump as a backup.
Okay. If you were flying along and you had your engine started sputtering a little bit, what's some things you would do in that particular situation based off the training that you've received?
Base sputtering, as in it's
not running smoothly.
It might be that the engine's running it's running a little rough, right? So the mixture might be too rich. So I would check to see if the mixture is adjusted correctly. I might have to lean the mixture, or if the carburetor heat's on. So I have to check for those.
Okay. So you adjusted the mixture. It didn't work. It didn't help. You adjusted the carb heat. It didn't help. still running very rough, almost like the engine's getting starved from fuel, what else would you do?
Maybe check to see if the fuel pump's on, or if the fuel selector is selected to a proper tank, and see if the fuel pressure is there. So just to keep making sure that if the fuel is flowing into the engine.
Okay, so you cut the fuel pump on and the engine starts running good again. What could you deduce?
Probably the fuel pump that the engine has by itself, it probably failed. So it needs the electrical fuel pump to keep feeding fuel into the engine. Okay.
And last question, what's the first thing you should do in any emergency?
You should always pitch to glide for best speed.
Well, that's only for a particular emergency. What about any emergency?
Declare Mayday.
Well, what if you didn't have a radio in your airplane? What if you're flying an airplane with no radio?
Your emergency.
This is actually such a simple answer. It just, people overthink this thing, okay? The first thing you actually do in any emergency is panic, and go ahead and get that out of the way. But the second thing is, do we have anything that would help us to kind of guide us through what we need to do for an emergency?
Okay, so like a checklist.
Okay, so the first thing to do in any emergency is do what?
To go through the checklist.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I've put you through enough pain and anguish tonight. I think we've done a good job here, and we've got some great data there. We're going to be able to help you and share with your instructor. And we're going to go ahead and ask Damian to come out here. Damian is his instructor, and we're going to review this. I'm going to review this outcome of this little mock check ride with Damian, and they're going to work on some things, and we're going to send them to the check ride, and it should be a success. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with Damian. All right, folks, we're back here with the CFI of this brilliant candidate tonight, Damian Morrissy. And Damian, I'll go ahead and debrief you. Hopefully, were you satisfied with the results? Or, I know a lot of instructors are sometimes ultra critical when it comes to their students. And again, I want to make sure we understand, and I apologize before you start talking. The candidate has a little over 5 weeks before his check ride, so we're talking about something. If anybody's being critical on the way that some of these stuff were answered, I mean, we have plenty of time to work on this. We're just basically here to kind of show you exactly how this procedure works. Sorry, Damian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was very satisfied. I love this process because it gives you a nice opportunity to see areas of improvement, some things that we need to work on. And to be honest, it's helpful to me because it shows areas maybe we didn't cover enough. So, but as far as David and his answers that he gave and the way he worked through some of the problems that you presented, I think was great. I think he was using the skills that we've learned, and we just need to hone up on some specific details that you had asked about. So it was great. I loved it.
Cool. Well, I'm going to give you just some things that I wrote down.
Okay.
Feel free to ask me anything about if you need any more information in regards to this, because I know you as the instructor probably want to go back and do some more work with him in prep in his 5 weeks that he has left. Some of the things I may talk about are just like nitpicky things, and some things may be a pretty major things. So let's look at some things here. I'll start off with a nitpicky thing. No matter how many people like to say it, there's no such thing as a biannual flight review. It's just called a flight review. The most common wrong way to say it is a biannual. That's used to be that many years ago, but we don't call it there, and it's just kind of stuck with it. They want you to use the FAAsafety.gov and use the WINGS program, and if you do that, it's about a 12-month deal. It's not really not biannual. So annual or just a flight review is the best way to say that. We got into pilot qualifications he did very well in. Airworthiness requirements, we got into that. Some of the things that we're looking at is he needs to have just a little bit better flow with going into the aero. There is an acronym I think is common in the industry for knowing the maintenance inspections. It's AV8s, where the I is actually a 1. So going through those when the examiner says what are the required inspections and what are you looking for. In the check ride, as you know, he's going to have the logbooks on the table. And I know you're probably going to have that tabbed out. and go over that with them. So just like open it up, so that's what it is, that's what it is, that's what it is. And I specifically said the word airframe. So it would be airframe, engine, prop. Okay, so those particular things. Now this one was, it could be or could not be, but I'm pretty sure it's not what he said. I'm pretty sure your ELT is a 406 megahertz, not a 121. It's actually both, I'm being told. Okay, good. So that's something to think about as well, just to kind of say the whole thing in regards to what that is. The another thing was airworthiness directives. And when you go through that, the FAA's website is brought up by the serial number on that. This is a very common thing that bites pilots all the time because they simply just don't know how to go and use the FAA's website. Once you see it one time and you go back and do it the second time, it takes you about half the time that it took you to the first time to do it. But then once you start doing it, it's really such an easy process. And then you just go. And if the mechanic is a good mechanic, they'll actually have two lists inside the maintenance logs. They'll have an AD compliance report and an AD list. So all the ADs and then how they complied with it. Okay. There was one thing here, which was a special airworthiness information bulletin, or SAAB. That's actually something that's in the ACS. That's a required knowledge thing. The special airworthiness information bulletin are things that are so incredibly broad. Like I think the one that I just recently saw, which came out a month ago, I think, was basically saying that for airplanes that only have lap belts or Y-shaped belts, they recommend that they install additional airbags. So there'd be some things like you read a SAIB and you're like, wow, it really doesn't apply to me at all. So those are very broad things that recommendations where the FAA has seen things and they're like, let me make a recommendation here. There's a FAA order on that. It's FAA order 8110.100 if you want more information on that one. When it comes to inoperative equipment on the plane, he'll need to have a working knowledge of 91.213. In 91.213, if you just go to the Delta area and start there, Delta I, 2, 3, and 4 is the main thing there. And then, of course, there's the last thing. There's the 4 items that you have, a sequence of events that he would have to go through and determine airworthiness. Alpha through Charlie is really not applicable because that's only dealing with MELs. And, of course, he doesn't have an MEL for the airplane. So it would be important for him to understand what an MEL is, as well as an MMEL, which is also very, very common task that examiners ask about on this check ride as well. Like, do you have an MEL, or what is an MEL, especially for commercial pilot ratings? And then him being a little bit more familiar with Part 43, Appendix A, with some of the things that he can do in regards to your preventative maintenance. You know, can he change a tire? Can he change a light bulb? Yeah. I was trying to get him to talk about the special flight permit or ferry permit. That's usually just a filling out a form on the FAA's website and then calling a FSDO and arranging some time there with a mechanic so you can determine how you would get that there. So that was another one. When we got into the weather information, so when someone tells me they use a specific thing to do, that's exactly what I'll hone in on. So if somebody says foreflight, that's like a large, vast thing. Well, it's actually, no matter which one you use, it's a large amount of systems that we can turn into. But I think sometimes when we're looking at foreflight, they only look at certain products. So if I start digging into all the products, that could go drastic. Aviationweather.gov is something very similar. They're in the verge of changing over. They have a current beta site right now, which they're having a bunch of new products on. But one of the products on there that if a person does use aviationweather.gov that they really need to know, which a lot of pilots are very weak on, is we go from the METAR to the TAF to the graphical area forecast. Now, of course, he's going from a controlled airport to a controlled airport that has TAFs at each side. So he gets a good idea about what the forecast is for those, but there's the weather that's in between, which the graphical area forecast would be a great tool to be able to do that. There's actually a learning videos on the aviationweather.gov website about that. We didn't get a chance to cover that, but that's definitely something that he'll need to know. Knowing how to read it from start to finish is definitely vital. Being able to see it and recognize what it is vital. The knowing when they come out and how long they're good for. Mm-hmm. So he did good on the TAF. So TAF comes out. So actually has 3 different time periods. It can come out whenever it's needed. It can come out, but the standard is 24 and 30 hours for that. And they're good for 6 hours when they come out. They have very weird release times. So they're actually to the minutes, and one of them was shown on the reports, like 17:41, and then 6 hours from there. So it's got very, very odd release times on those things. It used to be top of the hour back in the day. For some reason, they changed it. I'm not sure why. Knowing how to read the station model is another one too. Very much fair game for that. And the Zulu time. So he said local time and subtract 4. Okay. So it was a local time plus 4 on that. So anything past the AO2, ran into a little bit of issue on the TAF with not knowing like certain things like vicinity area thunder showers or vicinity showers, VCSH. Mm-hmm. That was another one. All pilots should definitely know how to give a PIREP. So that's something that should be reviewed. When I asked him what kind of weather how would he get a weather update on his destination? Mm-hmm. So I really had to go fishing on that one. In the end, he did know, but I really had to go fishing a lot to get that weather. That would, in a real check ride, if I had an FAA official sitting in with me, they would be elbowing me in my ribs a little bit on that one. That was really at the limit. But of course, this is all mock, so who cares? Very close to what it is. Got to the chart. Mm-hmm. Very common problem with that ForeFlight is they have the TAC zoom feature cut on, and so when that's zoomed in, it just changes the way that it looks from a sectional over to a TAC. Very common thing. I recommend personally turning that feature off, and then if you need to, you can just turn it back on if you're going to be flying into a Bravo area where that is applicable to you. Again, that's just my opinion. You're the instructor. You do what you want to do. You do you. He did really good on the airspace. He had a lot of things going. He knew about the coming into the Charlie, the magenta flags and 20 miles out. He was really okay with that. But definitely needs a review. And then the rocket ship game, as I think is a very common. Have you ever heard of that?
I have.
Okay. That's a pretty good way to do it. You know, just put them anywhere on the chart and say, let's go vertically and see where we're going with that. He did have some, not sure if you heard it, but when he did have some issues on the lower part with that. And the reason for is I think he missed that there's a Class Echo vignette encompassing that Charlie as well. So a little bit of the numbers on the low end there were not to spec. On the airport diagrams, there's at PDK, there's a little strip there at the very end of the runway, or beginning of 3 right, or at the end of 2-1 left. It's a EMAS. Okay, you know what that is? Yep. Okay, so he definitely needs to know what that is. By the way, for those at home, that's if the airplane runs off the end of the runway, 2-1 left at PDK, it's like a collapsible, crushable concrete. It makes the aircraft kind of bog down in there and kind of brings it to a stop, so it doesn't overrun and go out into the roads and stuff. The data that we had on Savannah, which was below the runways, is all the single tire, dual tire weights of airplanes landing on those runways and the weight of the runway that can take, or the rate that the runway can take. Right. So that was one. He did really good understanding about knowing if the lasso was going to be active, but he said NOTAM. He needs to say ATIS. But he knew it was reported someplace, but he just said the wrong thing. And then, of course, the figures on the runway, which dictate a lasso, which is that figure there. If I could draw it, everybody sees how I'm drawing it out with my finger. But just knowing that. So going over a review of those charts, whichever areas he's going to go to on his Checkride, and just making sure from top to bottom, tons of questions on there that an examiner can ask that can get really in the weeds on. We ended off here talking a little bit about systems, a little bit rushed through there, but I got the information that I wanted to get as far as what we're doing here. But knowing the systems and how they work. So the rote stuff that he had, he needs to get into the understanding and the application correlation stage. So here's how you draw it out on the board. Here's how we go through it. But here's what it looks like if it's not working. Here's what it looks like if part of that is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And of course, the first thing we do in any emergency is panic, right? And then the second thing is pull out our checklist or perform a flow, meaning that it's the bold portions part of the checklist that we memorize. We definitely don't want to have an engine failure on the upwind and then pull out a check. Let me see here, engine failure on the upwind. We definitely don't want to do that. So flows are that part of the checklist that we have memorized. And in this particular case, if you started having engine problems, I think the best thing to do is just, when it comes to engine problems at all general, there's only 3 things that make an engine run. It's part of the fire triangle, if you remember from high school and going through chemistry class or science class. It's either the fire, it's either the air, or it's the spark. And so I'm trying to always make sure pilots understand, like, let's say, the engine's not running rough. Let's touch the mixture. Let's touch the fuel. Let's touch the pump. Nope, that didn't work. Well, is it the gas? Let's do something with the gas. Nope, that didn't work. Well, is it the air? Nope, it's not the air. Well, I don't know what it is. Let's plan for an emergency. So keeping our wits above us when we're in cruise is good. If you have an engine failure close to the ground, then you can panic and do all that other good stuff. But anyway, that's all I really had. I'm pretty sure that, as you watched in from the recording room, studio, that you probably saw some other things as well that you have questions about. Do you have anything else for me?
I don't have anything else for you tonight.
Well, this has been a wonderful experience tonight. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Todd Shellnut with CFI Pro Courses, also with my good friends at Gold Seal. And thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again in the future.